Namaskara. Welcome to the Tutul Dialogues, Namma Bengaluru Edition. Our topic for today is Bharat at 100. Do we have the institutions and talent to succeed? This is a very interesting topic, and it reminds me of 2-3 things that I want to say as we start. One is the statement that inspires me a lot. It's also on our website, which is that the consciousness of an organization cannot be higher than that of its leaders. I have had the opportunity to work with 400 companies and been amazed with the kind of vision and dedication that some of the leaders have shown about building it. I've also seen organizations where great ideas have died because leaders have chosen and made different decisions. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is that when I started consulting 25 years ago, everyone wanted to create visions that were 10 and 15 years. Let's create a 20-year vision. One of the companies we work with, Amul, which is in the news, was one such organization. And in the last 5-10 years, I hear organizations say, business is so uncertain, there's so much of volatility. Can we really think for more than 2 to 3 years? So again, I'm faced with organizations who think long term and say, let's visualize and build, and we'll adapt as we go along. And we have organizations who say, let's just survive the quarter and let's make the money. As a country, we are going to complete 100 years in 2047, and that's why the topic is Bharat at 100. It would be so great to have a group of people such as you today to visualize what is going well, what can we do we have the institutions and the talent to succeed. So for today's edition of Tutul Dialogues, we have a very interesting group of people from business, from education, and from the social sector. We have people who've started their own companies, and we have people who are part of iconic organizations that have been here for decades. So let me start by introducing each one of them. I'll start with Joy Srinivasan. She's the founder of Makkala Jagrati and such a prominent person in Bengaluru. Makkala Jagrati looks at bringing together and giving rights to people, children, and education so that they are part of society. But in addition to that, there are many interesting stories of how she runs Makkala Jagrati and how she coaches other institutions in not being dependent on the founder and thinking long term. She's also on the board of ISABS, a body of individuals that are highly respected in India, and we'll hear some stories from her.
Thank you.
Welcome. I'll go to Balaji Kumar. Balaji Kumar would have been in the Supreme Court practicing, but he chose to change his career after doing constitutional law and got into OD and HR and has worked with iconic organizations. He's currently the CHRO of Sonata Software, but has very many interests, including the East and the West and how they look at institutions. And I'm so thrilled that you're here today.
Thank you.
We have Maya. Maya is going to crystal gaze and tell us all the children who in schools today, 24 years from now, will be in the workforce. What are some of the things teachers are telling her? She started the Teachers Foundation and said that the best way to really shape minds is not to look at the children alone, but to look at the teachers. All of us remember our favorite teacher who shaped our choices. So Maya's done such incredible work in that area, and there are some unique insights she has about sensitivity and emotions and how the way you were taught impacts the way you teach, and what is the psyche of children when they reach the workforce. Guru is here from Deutsche Bank. He's worked with Goldman Sachs before, and 2 very large iconic organizations, and we'll hear a little bit about what makes these organizations what they are and what are his own views, and in his own way as a leader, what does he do to build the institution. Dr. Sid, welcome.
Thank you.
He's the CHR of Urban Piper. I think you see him in a lot of forums sharing his views with his panache. But over and above that, he's also Vice President of NHRDN. Bangalore chapter is one of the most active chapters. I see him there. And he also does a lot of work for traffic in Bengaluru city as a traffic warden.
That's right.
So that's really, really inspiring. Somebody who does something about the city. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Nirupama is the founder and MD of Ad Astra. This is a wonderful organization, and she told you precisely 323 people, if I'm not mistaken, 9 cities in India and 4 countries across the world. She co-founded it with her sister Jayanti. And one of the great examples of institution building is that the name of this organization was democratically voted by the team. And she really understands and looks at trends of talent and resources, so she'll be able to give us a balcony view of how it's moving in the right direction. So welcome, Nirupama.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you. Amit Kumar Agarwal. If you've seen the No Broker hoardings and the brand, he is the founder and CEO. No Broker is a unicorn, and I have a special relationship with him. We've been colleagues in the past. I've always wondered how brilliance and humility can go together, and maybe that's something he also brings to the table as a founder. So we'll ask him some questions on that. And finally, last but not the least, Vivek Rana. Vivek Rana helps organizations tell their stories in a purposeful way. So he has a ringside view of what CEOs and founders have to say about their organization, and some of the questions which he gently asks perhaps gets them to think. We are very happy to be working with Nothi Seaton, which is what he co-founded with Abhijit. And I'm Sujata Deshmukh. I am the CEO and founder of Tutul Consulting. We're a boutique OD consulting firm. Okay. So let me start with the first question. And I'll ask this question to Amit as well as to Vivek. So Amit, as a lot of us, everyone wants to do their own startup, right? We don't want to be part of an organization and follow. Everybody wants to do their own startup. What were some of the things that you experienced as you tried to build this institution? Why are you around when many others may not have been around? So we'd like to hear you say that, and I'll just ask him the question, then both of you can talk. So Vivek, what do you see CEOs and founders struggle with? And how do those struggles manifest in how they build institutions? So let's hear from both of you.
So I am a first generation entrepreneur. So there is no experience which I have had, and I had done consulting when Sujata was also consulting in ECS. So when basically we were building No Broker, and the way in which No Broker progressed, we grew very rapidly. So in 9 years, from 0 people to now we are 6,000 people. So the journey basically has been very quick and with full of ups and downs, and with the anxiety which startup funding brings and the investor basically moods bring. And so I think what I discovered is about, I think as a leader you also discover as to how do you lead. So I would say a large number of startup founders in India, tech startup founders, feel very pride in being micromanagers, and somehow that works for them. So how can a button, the color of a button on the home page can change without them being told? And they tell me with a lot of pride, and that's because they feel that their company, they have to control it, how they are responsible for the output. And somehow those organizations also prosper, they work, because many a times business model is very strong. I think what I discovered about myself is that I am okay if people make mistakes. So I was basically telling Sujata earlier that earlier when basically I started, I thought I am IT, I will do most of the things, and I will hire some junior guys who will do what I say. But soon I discovered when basically, so a fellow IT and a junior IT came to our office, somehow we ended up hiring him. And once he joined, I figured out that now there are 2 Amits. And he could basically think with the same logical thought process and do the same things. And then I discovered out myself that I am extremely okay with people doing mistakes, as long as it doesn't cost the house. So I discovered this about myself, that I am okay people do mistakes. I am okay not micromanaging it. I am okay delegating it. So that is what I have discovered over the past 8-9 years. And today the situation is that the 6,000 people are being led by 50 people, and all of them with good pedigree, but I completely delegate to them. So they have the veto power. If you are handling a vertical and me and you disagree on something, we have defined something called veto power. You say, I want to use my veto and I want to do this. And I'm sorry to say that in most of the cases, they are right. Because eventually they know more about their business, they are doing it day and night. So I've discovered that, theek hai bhai, unko kar len do, unko zyada pata hai. And that has resulted, so investors keep on asking us, how can you do real estate? So now we are a 1,000 crore revenue company, we do real estate, we are number 1 in packers and movers in India, we are number 1 in legal documentation, we are number 1 in painting. And investors keep on asking, how can you do so many businesses? What about the management bandwidth? And I say that I have all the bandwidth, because these people run it independently, run it with a lot of accountability, run it with a lot of joy. So this is what I've discovered during this process.
So the question to me was, what are the struggles
some of
us
the, yeah,
face,
so
right?
he's not getting into the design of the button on the home page, and he has bright people asking him questions. So
My personal journey, I think the biggest challenge is how we focus on our own individual growth. And I think for me, the last 3 years has been a journey of, sort of discovering myself, which is why even the organization is called Notice Your Turn, which is Know Yourself. Because I feel it is, to a lot of points which Amit raised, right? How do you learn to sort of not just think your voice and your thinking is the right in the room, right? And have space for other voices which may complement you, which may question you, which may be contrarian to you, allow for that space. And I think that happens only when you're willing to grow. And unless that sort of commitment to growth, self-growth happens, I think it's a challenge. It's a significant challenge. There could be a lot of other areas, but for me personally, I think it is this which really comes in the way.
All right. We'll move to Joy and Balaji. So I think there's a very good segue about self and how I grow and some of the choices you made. So Joy, do tell us a little bit about what would you tell a founder, or what would you tell someone who's trying to build an institution that lives longer and longer, and where are we being myopic from your story? And Balaji, you've worked with a lot of large organizations, and you currently work for an organization where you were telling me that the top team is very stable. Everyone wants to stay and grow. So you're not as big as the others, but you want to stay and grow. You've worked with L&T, you work with many large iconic organizations, and do tell us, what is it that makes people want to be part and stay and feel that pride? So let's hear from Joy and then from you.
Sure.
So like what Amit said, you're the first generation entrepreneur. I am the first generation learner from my family background. So for me, that was the starting point. How do you bring revolutionary thinking into the oppressed community to really stand up for owning their quality education in this world and be equal with the others? So that has been a haunting question for me as I was growing. I think to bring transformation in this field of bringing equality for the oppressed class has been my purpose, and even quitting a corporate organization to really start something way back about 20 years back. While starting this institution, for me as a founder, it is not about the Joy who's finding, creating this institution, but it is about how this can become a social movement going forward. It's not a small story of some individual's transformation. It's about how do you bring a social impact in the way the society can see how the marginalized can be uplifted into becoming equal in the society to learn and grow. So the intent was like, for the founder, how do you put an intent into the institution? Is it that you want to, reflect on how you want to be seen as a person, or how do you want the institution to be seen in the society? I think I didn't have any master degree that time to think in this way, but I think when I started, the intent was how this institution can become and stand on its own. Therefore, the initiative was to do a shared visioning of the organization, inviting all the different segment of people, including children. Children are the ones who defined even how this vision building can happen. They even came up with a name called Makkala Jagritiya Sundara Darshana. Means it's Makkala Jagriti's beautiful view. So that was the name we used for 2.5 days shared visioning. We used a future search model to do the shared visioning process. I think that was the a seed of DNA which was put into the institution, how it is a collective organization and it's no individual organization. The second part is how do you really therefore stay away and build the organization in such a way it can become sustained as it grows. I think the seed of putting that became very relevant. The intent of building it from an institution building than an individual growing in the thing. So today I'm glad to see that in 20 years time Makkala Jagriti has become in an auto mode. It has sustained itself, and the team which is working today is taking forward the organization with an intent which it was started, whether it could be the values, the culture, and the best practices how an organization should operate from. So yeah, that's something which is a seed of institution building, I feel. And how do you really delegate? How do you really believe and trust others to do it? And as Amit was saying, sometimes we think that we do the best, but when we come back and see that they have done better than us. So I remember early years itself, as around 2008, I had to travel abroad, and I left a very young, raw team. At that time, Makla Jagrati hired only people from the slum community, and I was trying to train them up to run this organization. Not even any of this tish-tosh people coming from outside, because nobody would come to our community-based organizations. We are working in the raw slum people, right? And many people will not come to work with us. And so I was building people from the slums who were like just 7th fail or 10th pass or PUC dropout. I picked them up and I said, like, let me build capacity in them to run these learning centers, which is the concept of Makla Jagrati. And they did fantastically well. They learned SMART goals, they learned many things, how to run an organization. And when I went away and came back, they had taken certain decisions which had buggered up, but then it was a learning opportunity. So, and I said they had done a much better job than I would do. And I think that's how you instill confidence in people, that you can do it, and making mistakes is a learning opportunity. Yeah.
Right. So again, a wonderful segue. I mean, but let me take a step back. I was reflecting on what an institution actually means, right? I mean, it's a sociological concept. Institutions are, they have something which are more permanent than the individuals who make it, sure. Right? And they're governed by a set of rules, norms, and a framework for decision making, essentially that. But when you decode that, there are a couple of things that you really find, that people who have started these organizations which have become institutions later on, their horizon, is 20, 30, 40 years. And then that is driven by a strong sense of purpose. And this is where, I mean, now when I, correlate it with some of the examples or the organizations that I have worked with, Larsen and Toubro, for example, driven by a strong purpose. I mean, right from the beginning, whether it was the founders or right up to Mr. Nayak or SNS himself, right? It's about a long-term vision, but at the core of that vision also is saying that it's all about nation building. And that really energizes the entire organization. So in Larsen and Toubro, I used to manage for the entire group what was known as the Leadership Assessment and Development Practice. A very, very well institutionalized system for the last almost 22 years, wherein, identified people go through a very rigorous assessment centers, and then they, then they move up the ladder, and then it gets into succession planning and all. Now, this is a process which used to consistently give people who have built Mumbai International Airport, Delhi International Airport, Statue of Unity, India's first nuclear submarine, Mangalyaan, right? Because when you see that your process is giving an individual, a leader who's going to go and build the Statue of Unity, that's satisfaction, right? That's the purpose which drives you. So somewhere when organizations have a larger purpose than the individual, I think that's where the institutional building starts happening. Exactly. So the fundamental thing about this is saying that it's no longer about that individual. It's about the larger ecosystem, right? And that's what I think drives institution building. From my experience.
Yeah. So individuals who lead institutions have their own story, but they create space for other people to add their stories, and then collectively that story goes on and is repeated.
And they believe that they are agents in that entire process. If you are an agent, you are a catalyst.
Absolutely.
That's how, and it is very strongly linked with their own identity. If your identity is that of something that you are the be all and end all of it, you've killed it in the beginning itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So who I am, how I let go, how I see my role, how I see my identity, these are very interesting. Thank you. So we'll go to Guru and we'll go to Dr. Sid. Okay. So Guru, you've been part of very large organizations and they have lasted for a long time and they will continue to be there even when we are not around. What are some of the things they do really well that keeps it going? So that's the question to you. And Dr. Sid, you've worked with a lot of the new age organizations. What can new age organizations learn from the others, and what are new things that some of the institutions you're part of are doing to, build an institution?
I'll start. You mentioned two large organizations. I also worked for a decade for a much smaller organization. I probably learned more from that than these two organizations. Because it went through a lot of ups and downs. And the ups was their dot-com bubble and whatnot. The down was because they had absolutely no process, nothing in place, right? So things were all a bit, haywire, right? So, but then we went through and we the organization still exists doing really well because they fixed all of those things. Mm-hmm. And they fixed all of those things because of a specific set of leaders there, right? So I think what was missing there was management, right? Like proper management, but they certainly had the leadership, right? So I think hopefully people understand the difference between leadership and management. So the management was not there. They got the right set of people to fix some of those issues. So that was anyway the first sort of my stint in my career. My current organization is slightly different in that they went through, I think they're still going through a very, very tumultuous period. European bank, not a lot of margins, quite a few players, embroiled in all sorts of, regulatory scrutiny and whatnot. But what is taking us through this period is really the leadership. 5 years back, there was a leadership development sort of course that I was part of, was at London Business School, and it was the entire management board, which was almost a newly reconstituted management board, come and spend an entire day with a group of 400 of us, right? 400 of us out of 90,000. The management board, when the company is going through the most difficult period, spent an entire day with us. The CEO poured his heart out. And the one thing that he said that resonates with me even today is, he says, we are Deutsche Bank, we will bleed blue, right? Oh. It's in our blood, we will bleed blue. And to Balaji's point around purpose and vision, if you don't have that, then you can't have different people who have different things in their life and in their career to be joined by a central thing.
If I can just make a point before you speak. So I was reading the work of Boris Groysberg at Harvard, who says that there's a myth of talent portability, and he said something very interesting. He said people in small organizations do well because of the hustle and because of the initiative they take. It's easy to move from small to big. When you go into a large organization or an institution, there are so many hidden systems and processes that make you successful. So they used to have a bet, all the recruiters, that when someone left a company, in those days GE was one of them, they would struggle in the first job. So the recruiter would wait. Then the person moved to the next job and the recruiter would wait. And he said, now he's figured it out. Or she's figured it out, let's go and get them. So sometimes things just happen in large organizations because scale requires a different kind of thinking and it's invisible, so we don't realize it. Yeah. But if you move from a well-organized, structured institution to a smaller place, then you suddenly realize, oh, how does this work? So that's something I wanted to comment. And over to you, Dr. Singh.
No, I started my career with Captain Gopinath in Air Deccan, right? So before probably people started off with the word called startup, I was in it and in the eye of the storm. Right, sometimes literally, right, when the aircraft hits turbulence. And then of course my formative years were in very large companies like HCL. And again I came back to startups. I worked in healthcare, in retail, and now of course in tech startups and so on. I think first principles, if I again go back to the way you looked at it, what does an institution mean? And when I did a little bit of research, I think institutionalization has become more synonymous with institutions, right? So we'll let go of that. If I do a little bit of sensing in terms of professional circles, what we mean when we say institution, I think it's somewhere around what I call a duo of enduring and endearing, right? That sense of a collective which is there for a larger purpose, right? So if we look at Arvind Eye Hospitals, it's a very clear purpose that's there, right? eliminating needless blindness. Do whatever it takes to do that. Right? Very simple. I think one is the purpose. The other is more of the strength of the business model. Right? If there's money, if there's a market, I mean, there's a little bit of jargon going around saying product market fit. Right? From where I come, if there's no market fit, then there's no product, there's no business. But the fact is, if there's a little bit of capital that's there and you're allowed to experiment and hope that people's lifestyles change. In India, we've shown that Kellogg's now starts making upma, right? So that lifestyle change thing is a little bit of a far-fetched wish. That's another thing that really helps, right? So again, your pointed question was, what about the new age companies? So I was asked to, one of my friends reached out to me and said they're looking for a HR head, but this person's got to be to have had a 5-year stint at least in a product SaaS startup. So, my countenance changed like the Buddha. Okay, my name is also Siddharth. So I said, go around and find me a SaaS startup that's been there for 5 years. Right? I think he got the hint. So my fundamental question, again, digging deeper or double clicking as we say in startup language, right, is asking this institution building is whose need. Right? Many times I think founders also kind of get into it looking at an exit.
Yes.
Right? There are a few other founders who are wishing for an IPO. Right? So is institutional building a need? And if it is so, how many founders have that? The good news is many of founders after at least the last 6 months are beginning to look at it. Right? Where profitable business needs a conference theme to have. Right? So that's kind of brought me to this paradigm, something that I've built out, which is called the diamond line. So if you take any mine, a large mining operation, you'll have large equipment, you'll have thousands of people working, and then you have all the drama and details with it. But what actually matters there is whether there's a diamond line in the mine. Right? So I think what I've been also working on in businesses is find that diamond line in your business. That's what makes all the sense. Right? Find out what makes people want to do things that helps find the diamond line and mine it, right? Versus have to do, right? I get into an MBA college of 100 students and say, how many of you came here? How many of you were sent here? There's this ripple of giggles and then, alluding to the last bench of teachers sitting
90%
there. 90%
would have been sent there.
Right? So how do I move the organization's collective unconscious and conscious behavior towards want to do, right? So find the diamond line, find what are those behaviors where people want to do, and then set up the context. Like Sumantra Ghoshal says in Smell of the Place, right? How do I set up that context? You are talking about the teachers and the context they set, right? So how do I set that? I think that is what's actually helping. And I've actually tried it out in a couple of organizations, helped turn around healthcare thing, started at 30 NPS, went to 75 NPS, helped a retail organization turn around 75% of top line, 100% of top line, 2 years. So it works, right? And I think one of those important things in this entire diamond line in the mine is also managers as coaches. Because you might have the best PPT process in performance management, but I think the human process fails. So institution building, you got to have managers who manage performance, the company which has a purpose, but that purpose has got to have a business model. Right? Otherwise, one is all the time fixing holes in the boat, and institution is a far cry.
Well said, well said. Yeah. Which is a very beautiful segue, and I'll ask Maya and Nirupama to speak. So, Maya, the work that she does through the teachers is dealing with the young minds who are going to, after 20-24 years, grow and get into the workforce, which Nirupama will then pick up and do. So it's a very interesting. So we'll start with.
Also sitting opposite each other.
I'm picking up the.
Yeah, between this and between this, it's there. So let maybe the question to Maya is, what are teachers talking about? What do you see as the psyche of children today, and how do we ensure that when they grow up and get into the workforce, whatever it's going to be like 24 years from now, they are ready for it? One interesting thing I hear, and one of the 90% of clients we work with says collaboration is an issue. So want to hear from Maya about children and the schooling system, and what do we need to do so that when they go into the workforce, they are better equipped. And I'll ask Nirupama's question also. Nirupama, what are some of the concerns? Because how many people want to not work for organizations and want to try something on their own, and careers are so dizzy, it's a journey, they keep moving back and forth. How is that trend playing out? So maybe the both of you can talk about it. We'll start with Maya and then.
Okay. All right. Actually, it's an important question you asked. What should we do as teachers and adults in order to prepare our children? Yes, I think in our country, particularly with the new education policy of 2020, CBSE's own focus on life skills and 21st century skills, we talk about the importance of 21st century skills, life skills, under which there is even, collaboration and critical thinking and problem solving and decision making. These are all very important skills. These are all skills that we need even in the age of AI. We have to teach in a way that is nurturing the problem solving skills, the critical thinking skills, the sense of personal identity and self-awareness that children need to have if they have got to grow up as well-balanced, capable, competent human beings, young people who can get into the workforce. It could be getting into the workforce in terms of regular establishment sort of careers, or even do startups. There's a huge gap between what we want to do as a country and what we actually do and what we plan to do. Sid talked about the importance of a business plan for a purpose. I like that. Even if you're a purpose-driven organization, you need to have a plan. Now the things that we are very good at creating policies, not just the new this education policy of 2020. Even the previous policies have been very good, of 1992 and 1986. The National Curriculum Framework of 2005, the current framework of 2023, they're all good policies, great intent, but we are terrible at implementing.
Exactly.
We are terrible because we do not look at the last mile. We just say, okay, you've got to know about this. So teachers have to know about what the new education policy is talking about. But the point is, teachers don't know how to do it. And that's why you have to help teachers learn or relearn, unlearn their conditioned habits, and then relearn a more participatory way of making sense of the world, because that is what then they can actually take into the classroom. So I would say, looping back to what you were asking, how do we help children be equipped for the world of work? We mustn't forget the teachers.
The world is changing very drastically. I mean, I think tomorrow morning there could be something else that we are hearing about how the world of work has changed from today. It's that fast, and maybe in hours and minutes. Why I'm saying this is, early 1995 I started my career in recruitment. Prior to that it was all HR. And I remember Apple was one of our biggest clients, and to place a person in Apple at that point in time from IBM, I had to speak to the candidate, I had to speak to his wife, I had to speak to his mother, I had to speak to his mother-in-law, right? And today if I do it, they will say you're intruding into my personal life, right? So it's changed. And then he's still working in Apple, right? And he still remembers me. Yesterday he wrote to me saying, I'm coming in April, will you be available, and we could have a meal together, right? And I can name him, he wouldn't mind, Ishwar Vangala, who works for Apple in London now. He's top 20 people of Apple. So one of my clients in London, they were asking me, how does a candidate remember you after 25 years? Right. Wow. Now, the reason is because you invested time because you thought that was the right thing for that candidate. And I coined this as social doctors. I think recruiters are all social doctors. I mean, at some point in time, I would like to patent it. We are social doctors. You don't pay me as a candidate. We don't take money from candidates, but the client pays us. So you have to deal with the candidates in a way that it is good for them. You don't need to say, okay, look at Balaji and say, okay, it's another invoice, right? And then say, look at Joy and say, with her I can get a higher amount, so let me place her. And I feel consultants have to be responsible also, as much as candidates can be confused at times. And you made a beautiful point. there are candidates. I remember during COVID especially, we had this great resignations. There was a great need for people, which is really turned around now. So when I told him, we are making a decision not to send you to the client. And he said, look, I thought I came to you because you are working with this client. I said, we are working with this client because they are relying on us and respecting us, right? Therefore, I won't recommend a candidate who's only looking at money and who's just shifting. And he was angry, and I told him, look, you're not going to like this, but let me tell you, one day you'll regret for this. And a little later, he joined some company at 1.8. Within 4 months, he lost his job. So companies can only give money from what they have, right? You can't, you would know that. If there's money in the basket, you can give that, right? If you are going to collect that money, you're going to collect it from your client. There's only that much available for you to, but if you're going to increase that, you're going to run under losses. If organizations have to survive in the future and to do well, I think you will have, earlier you had 20% unpredictability, now you'll have 80-90% unpredictability. Building lasting organizations requires definitely reinventing yourself at different points
stage.
in time. Even your purpose will have to get reinvented. So I feel situational leadership. What is the situation, what is the leadership will apply more whether to candidates that we deal with or organizations. And he said something beautifully, you know, from what you said, I feel you have no insecurities. Because the insecure boss is the one who's going to start holding everything, forget about the button and the color, even saying, why you looked at me before you looked at the side before I looked at. We have seen all these kinds of people. Yes. So I think it's important how you deal with it. Like we have close to about 15,000 people who are temp staff with us, right, and 323 people who are permanent staff. The temp staff are never driven by the purpose of the organization, right? We don't know what they are doing. They're just away, they're doing some work. It's like a journey in the train. You're getting down in this, then I'm kind of having resource allocation, which other train you can get into, right? But whereas the other people who are with us are driven by this purpose to build, to create something, and to hold them together, you need these things. You need one, definitely the muscle power, which is money. Then you need the good set of people. And thirdly, today I think digitization and all that, you know, with AI and all that is happening. I mean, so you don't know where one goes. And she said the teachers should be respected. And we work with a company now where the robots are teaching the children. And they have been valued at $5 billion and they are only 1 year old. And it will sing to the child. It will kind of know what it needs to do at what time, when it needs to eat the food, and this is operational in the US and
there's a school in Bangalore that has had robot teachers, and frankly, I'm completely against it. I think you can use AI in education, and I think there's a lot of potential, but having because then the child, a young child, is not able to distinguish between who's the human being and who's the robot.
So as the world evolves, the changes that are going to happen are going to happen at such speed and with such disruption that we need to get prepared for itself. Yeah. And I feel long-term jobs may not be the order of the day. Because it all depends upon the behavior, and the machines are taking over, then the machines are more predictable. So it's going to be difficult, but we'll have to find meaning in it.
So around 6 years ago, I helped set up the teaching function for a edtech company, right? And they're one of the few guys who are still around and hopefully profitable. So I had a little sneak peek into the kind of the workforce that's coming in 2 years, because 6 years ago they were in 8th standard, so RAN, they're in the middle of engineering. I think one of the major things is the teachers needed to have screen presence, okay, because this was edtech, right? Which meant students were not only saying teach me, but also give me a reason I should listen to you. So market yourself, sell yourself first, and then I listen to you, right? Now what this actually means at an individual level is I'm going to be a passive consumer, and that's kind of beautifully talking about, you know, self-learning. It's talking about candidates who are saying, you know, tell me what you can do for me versus what I can do for myself and what I can contribute to the company, right? Marshall Goldsmith talks about active engagement, right? We did a little bit of study around that in the company, and figured out that discretionary effort, right, far away from engagement. Engagement, I sometimes call it superstition, right? I hope that if engagement scores are high, then productivity is going to go up. Why not go after productivity, right? So if I look at discretionary effort, I think the key really is going to be in working with individuals, especially the next generation, being very authentic and telling them, hey, this is a business. We are all in it together, and I'm not going to treat you like I'm going to treat a cohort in digital marketing, right? Show you exciting stuff and appeal to your unconscious and make you behave in a certain way that you're not aware that you're behaving that way, right? It's like herding sheep. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be respectful, and I'm actually going to activate your will and say you're going to be actively engaged and be productive. I think that's one of those cornerstones that's actually going to help build institutions and like entrepreneurs like yourself build companies that endure and actively grow, right, and thrive.
So just picking up from Maya and Nirupama, one of the stakeholder in the child's development is the parent. Critical.
True, absolutely.
So we have done a lot of work in our organization keeping the other stakeholder as a parent as well, helping them to look at their role as a parent and what kind of values they can inculcate and how can they really aspire along with the child to really make them become who they want to become. Is another integral part of the growth. Otherwise, it's like very disintegrated in different worlds.
Now, this whole discussion about agency that the individual has, but that itself is, I think, something that needs further development. I teach at a premier, communication and advertising school, and I was doing, I thought the Dove case study is a great case study to look at, which is a 20-year history of how an organization has been driven on purpose, faced several challenges, made mistakes, evolved, still, significantly valuable today. And the kids just turned around and say, it's totally irrelevant for me because all I want is to get a job and I'm never going to get placed in Dove, right? I want to get into a D2C company tomorrow. Tell me how I'm going to get a job. Yeah. So the whole agency of even saying, do I have choice? Am I willing to learn?
Yeah.
Can I expand my horizon? Is being defined by where my ability to be Instagrammable is going to come from.
And also, am I able to look at another point of view which I'm not thinking about right now?
Absolutely. And so that brings me to a very fundamental question, which I love to hear your thoughts, Sujata, on it, which is purpose itself, right? Everyone spoke about purpose at varying levels, but if you unpack purpose, what is it really? I mean, in my little understanding, I think it still comes down to the very fundamental aspect of trust. But trust is such a loaded concept still. How do you really build that?